Well, good morning. Welcome to Buddha's in Your Landfill or Zen Live. I keep changing Zen around. Basically, when I use Zen, it means understanding. Aha, I see. Satori. Wow, I didn't see that. Oh, it's a surprise. It's an understanding. It's a enlightenment. It's a wide-angle lens instead of a narrow lens. It's a new frontier. It's expanding boundaries. All of that stuff is the way I use it. So I don't use it in a limited way at all. So now we were talking about Avatar yesterday. We were talking about Mad Men and Joseph Canville and man being in free fall because all of the mythological safety nets have been removed by rationalism from the Enlightenment and science. You can't, science and myths are not very compatible. Science is kind of like an eraser, and it wants to erase all the mythological thinking, all the subjective thinking, and it wants to erase it all and just have objective facts, the objective view. And so we're going to look at that today, and I want to bring it current because Buddha's in Your Landfill is about finding a Buddha today. And so the Buddha I found in my landfill was a little piece from the hearings on Gorsuch by Al Franken when he brought up the case of the truck driver. And this was also, and also shared this on Facebook, when there was a testimony by the truck driver about that case. And I just thought that was a kernel that shows the difference between the law. So we're going to talk about that this morning. And just to review, this particular truck driver was hauling meat, I guess, or something, in sub-zero weather, but 27 degrees below Fahrenheit. And the brakes froze, so he stopped. He couldn't drive the trailer, the truck, because the brakes were frozen, and that it would be unsafe. He would cause a wreck. So he called his boss up and said, "Come get me, I'm stuck." And they said, "Okay, hang in there." So he waited for hours and hours and hours, and the heater in the truck was going bad, and he was starting to freeze to death. And he kept calling, "Come get me." They said, "Wait, don't leave, don't leave. We're coming, we're coming." They never came, so he was starting to go numb. He was starting to fall asleep in the sub-zero weather and freeze to death. So he disconnected the truck and drove to a warm place. And then when he was able, he went back and got the trailer. And the trucking company fired him. And this went to court. And Gorsuch sided with the trucking company and said, "You broke the law." And Al Franken said that was absurd. So there you have and I thought this was just, not without getting political or anything, it was just a great little kernel to understand how we look at the law today, and even going all the way back to Genesis about that. So the idea in Western society, Western civilization, which is different from Oriental, from Asian ideas, Zen and Buddhism, yoga, the idea in the West is, and this came out of Mesopotamia, this came out of the planting societies of the Levant, the Near East, Persia, Iraq, all those places, the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the first planting civilizations discovered the order of the universe by watching the stars at night, and they discovered that there was an order, there was a law going on, and so they began to structure their society in accordance with the observable laws of the sky, you see. So there was an idea there of fitting society to the law. And so this was incorporated into the Bible, where there you have a personal creator who creates the law, you see, and then he wants man and nature to fit the law. And if you don't fit the law, you get kicked out of garden. You're bad, you see. So so this creates a rebellion against the law. But the idea is that the law is externally imposed. And then science came in and said, well, we don't really need this creator in order to predict the future, but the laws of nature are to be discovered, like the laws of God. So you had with the Enlightenment the idea that there are immutable laws of nature, and that if you can discover the law of nature and get in accord with those laws, you can make stuff. You can harness the power of creation if you can figure out what the laws are. And we still do this because it works. But, so you see there's this two mythic ideas that this law is externally imposed because excuse me, I swallowed my own spit. The idea here is that that nature, without the law, is chaotic. So this gets into everything. This idea that without law and order, human beings are going to go nuts. They can't control themselves. They have to be externally controlled, and they need to fit into the law. You see, so this is this is an assumption, and I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's an assumption that is quite often tested, because we test this in our own families. I mean, do I just as a child, do I just submit to and obey the Father's law, or do I sneak out at night? You see, so this begins in the early stages too. So this is the conflict between the left and the right in picking a judge. Is the law created in the past, like in the Constitution, and is it absolute, and then forever and ever everybody must fit that law? But then the other idea is that, well, life evolves. See, this gets back to that whole creationist, evolutionist thing. We can't get away from this duality, this contradiction. It's like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers dancing. So you get this absolute versus relativism. No matter where we go, we get caught up in this double bind. Because if you choose one, you can't choose the other. And if you choose the other, you can't choose that. But they're both valid. They're both imperatives. But they're contradictory. So this contradiction, when we run into it, is what I call the labyrinth. Should I go this way or that? Choose this or that? I can't choose one without denying the other. So it forces us into a creative resolution, a spontaneous creative resolution. And there's an evolution when that happens. So let's take a look at what we put on here before. So we get this idea of the living law or the dead law. Well, the dead law would be something that's written down in the past, and you can't change it, even though you're growing. It's like you get a suit of clothes, and you're 15 years old, and this is the law. You got to wear these clothes, but you start growing. So you start popping, or my age, you start growing again, and you don't, and your belly grows, and you don't fit the clothes anymore. You know, so it's kind of like that. You know, is the law one suit for all, forever and ever? That's the idea of absolute law. You can't mess around with it, because if you start messing around with it, chaos will happen. You see, it's the idea that this is what happened in after the 70s. So the 60s was a rebellious explosion of individuals asserting their conscience against the law, which was the social conformity. And then the 70s was just an androgynous mix of everything. Dirty Harry had to come in and clean things up, you see. So Law and Order came back. Even all the TV shows, all the movies were about bringing law and order to these druggies and all this corruption and chaos. Society's falling apart. Law and order. So law and order came back, lock them up. Lock them up. Lock them up. So throw away the key. 3 strikes, you're out. Fill up the prisons. Get all this chaos out of here. The law's got to be obeyed, you see. This coming down of the law again. Strong father. Get these kids in alignment. They can't handle themselves. They can't lift the hammer. This whole idea that humanity by itself, if not subjected to a strict law, will go crazy. Can't handle it. But this is a idea of life as being of life being a machine. This is an assumption that the law is external and applied to life, and life must fit the law. But the East, the Buddhist, Zen, and Yoga, and the philosophies of the East look at the law organically. So a flower does not fit the law of a flower. The flower creates its own law organically. So the law and the flower are the same, but it's a living law. So the law evolves. So if the environment changes, the flower will change to fit the changing environment. So there is a balance then between the environment and the organisms. It's all one. It's not two. The law is not separate from life. You see, they are one, but we perceive them as two, but they're one. So let's take that idea of oneness. Let's go back to Avatar and couple that up with the Lord's Prayer. It's my favorite prayer. And basically the Lord's Prayer is the commandment, let there be one. So it starts out, Father, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. All right, this is an affirmation of oneness, of one will. But it's not, the way I understand it, it's not an affirmation of make me fit the law, but let me fulfill the law as one. So this was what Jesus basically said he did. He didn't come to obey the law. He came to, or get rid of it, he came to fulfill it. So he came to make it one, you see, to make the law one. But that means to make it living, because if you can't be living if you conform to something that's past. You can't evolve. So if you're alive, you're evolving, you're changing. So the law has to change with you. Now here's a good metaphor, the one I use all the time. Look, and we know this all the time, but we don't see it this way. So there are 2 maps in your car. I know there are 2 maps in my car. There's the Atlas map, might have a book of maps, and then there's the GPS on the cell phone. All right. So I want to go somewhere. So traditionally, we have always, my wife would be the navigator, and she would look at the map and say, Art, you got to go on this route here, and there's only one way. That's the law. There's the shortest distance is from here to here, and that's the way you got to go. And if you go around like this, you're disobeying the law. You have to fit the law. You see, there's only one way to go, and you got to fit it. You can't go running all over the place because you won't get home. You put in the GPS, and you'll notice with the GPS that it's a living map, so you can watch it. So you turn left here, and the world adjusts with you. You see, so you can try and the navigator is always telling you how to get home. The navigator in the GPS, I have a woman. No matter which way I go, she never gets mad at me and calls me an idiot. She says, there is no right or wrong. No matter what you do, you're still okay. You're still going home. So the law, then, and if I want to go left, if I don't like the way the map says to go, I can go this way, and then I can go home from there. So I'm always going home, you see. I'm always going to truth. I'm always going to the one, you see. But in the flat map, you see, the one is the correct way. And if you don't go that way, you're disobedient. And you're going to hell. And it sometimes feel like that. So with the GPS map, you're always okay. You're free to explore because you're always going home. You always have the law. So where is the law, you see, is to obey God, well, or to be pointed towards God. So it's like a little compass. So in the GPS map, if home is God, or where you're going, you're always going that way. So you get a chance to explore. I can go this way and I can still get home. So you get to be free and obey. You get to be a rebel and obey at the same time. And when the law is separate from you, you see, then you have to conform to it, and you can't because you're growing and you want to explore. So you can't explore and obey the law at the same time. Scientists know this, and all scientists, most inventions are discovered when you break the law, or you screw up, or you make a mistake. You see, you don't create anything when you're just following the law, because the law is written in the past. So how can you create the future? How can you create something new if you're just obeying the script from the past? So this is a fundamental question about the law. So getting back to Gorsuch, you see, he obeyed the law. He applied the law. You broke the law. The trucking company had a law. You're not supposed to leave your trailer. You're guilty. But it's absurd. He would have to die in order to obey the law. You see. So this required a creative solution, kind of like Solomon, you know. And you got these two opposites here. If you obey, you have to come up with a creative application of the law rather than a rigid application of the law, you see. And so this fundamentally, this gets into, again, creationism versus evolution, the idea that reality or God created the world as this, and you can't change it, you can't mess around with it. So women are men, and women are women, and men are men, and you can't screw around with it. You know, everybody has to fit their category. Everybody has to fit their definition. Everybody has to fit their social role. You can't grow, you can't expand, you can't evolve, you see. So there has to be a creative balance between creationism and evolution, between relativism and absolutism, in order to fulfill the law and give it flesh and blood, which is what Christ said he came to do. To fulfill the law means make the law human. Give the law flesh and blood, which means the human, as our nature is to evolve. Our nature is to grow. Our nature is to discover new worlds, to discover new definitions, to create the world. We're constantly creating the world that we live in, but you can't create the world that you live in if the creation is already created. You see? So this is a fundamental conflict with our nature. With our nature, you see. And this has been a fundamental conflict in Western civilization. It hasn't been a conflict in the East because they had never started with this concept of the law being external to life, and life has to obey the law. Nature has to obey the law, you see. We even get into this with marriages, in this whole conflict of being the marriage vows. Or the woman says, I'll have to be obedient to the husband. Well, what's that saying is that nature has to be obedient to the law. The husband is the law, and wife is nature. She has to be obedient to the law, you see. And that doesn't fly very well now. So there's a lot of, it's a very deep question, and it's very ancient, And we're all really battling with it in our own personal life. Every individual is battling with the assumptions that we govern ourselves by, and we all have this prayer of let there be one. Well, let there be one is interpreted by the right, or the creationist, you see, of there's one law, so to let there be one, you have to obey it. You have to get in accord with it. And this is true, but at the same time, you are also the law. We create the law. See what I mean? That this once you split the law from life, you end up with absurdity. You end up with absurdity once you abstract the law from organic life. You end up with absurdity. So the problem is that the absurdity is the point where we become creative. It's only when you see the absurd is that you realize that that your two choices are between this or that. If it's absurd, both of them, you can't choose one or the other because both choices are absurd. Like the trucker, stay with the truck and die. Get on the road with your truck and die, which means have an accident, you see. That's absurd. So we have to be able to see the absurd in these perennial, continuing conflicts of the law and its application, and the living law and the dead law, let's put it that way. If the law is living, then I have to create the law, because it's absurd if I don't. And so then that law is coming out of me. It's not being applied by some God or by scientist, you see, or some psychologist, you see, who wants me to fit their definition of me, you see. So it's those moments of absurdity that are portals to creating myself, to creating you. And there's a great deal of laughter in that. And this is the point of Avatar. He was caught between the Sky People and the Navi, and he was in no man's land. Both of them, he didn't know which was real. And so he did a mad leap, an absurd leap, a crazy thing. He jumped on the back of death, the last shadow. You see, he cut the rope. So these absurdities, if we can recognize them, we can see that life is absurd, and we can laugh at it, and that laughter creates the one again. Let there be one. So you see this? You see it when there's when we reach these moments of absurdity, of the double bind, where you lose either way. You're absurd either way. You can't win either way. No choice. You're a loser, loser, loser. That's absurd, because life is one, but I have to discover it. So I can only discover life is one and put myself in accord with life, and let there be one. Let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That means let there be one will, and that's not one external will that I have to obey. It means let me be one. Let me be one with the whole cosmos. Let me be one with God. Let me be one. I am one with God. I am one with the cosmos in the creative act that transcends the absurd. So I'm just, working this out myself with you here, and it's quite remarkable. And I hope that it sinks in, because we're always having moments of absurdity, but we can't rest with it. We can't laugh in it. We can't go into it because we back off from it. Vertigo. We can't go there. So I got to choose one or the other, but we can't because it's absurd. So we're caught in a straitjacket. we're like the microphone against the amplifier. Wow, 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 wow. I can't move. I can't choose. I can't get out, you see. Everything's absurd. But we've got to go through that. There's a fundamental realization that life is absurd. That life is an ambiguity. And that is the portal for awakening. That is the portal for creativity. That is the portal for insight. And the insight makes you one, because insight is one. It's not two. It's not this or that. It's a new one. Insight, I see. I see the one. But the one you see is totally new. It never existed before. So you're creating the cosmos. The insight, the eruption of creativity, when you enter through the rabbit hole of the absurd, is the creative power of the cosmos. You're it. You're creating your world as one, as you. You're creating you as one, even though, and other people, we're not talking about other people, what they think and all that. We're talking about you as the world. You are the world and the world is you. But you only realize that when you turn and face the absurd and go through it with laughter. It's called the dark night of the soul. It's called James Stewart and Vertigo. It's the vertigo we feel when there are two realities offered and each one stands by itself. They're mutually dependent, but they're contradictory, and it's absurd, you see. Like we are today with the news. There's the reality the journalists are coming up with, the news, and there's the fake news. Or there's the alternate facts of Trump. You've got two realities. Trump's reality, what the fake news is, what the news is coming up with. You see, and this is creating an anxiety because we don't know what the law is. We don't know what reality is, you know. So we're going into this nationally. So anyway, let us end there. I think we've covered it. So far, we'll pick this up tomorrow, and I'll see you this evening at Martini time. And have a great day.